Thank you, everyone. Welcome back to today's episode of Limp-Cryptid. I'm the host, Axel. My goal is to submerge your senses, get the gears grinding for every truth seeker out there into the strange, paranormal, and supernatural. Today's encounter encompasses a family's group of encounters, only to realize decades later they were experiencing the same exact thing. More of that story next. Please stay tuned on Limp-Cryptid. All right, everyone, before we get started, if you'd hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, it would greatly help me out, and it would definitely help every truth seeker out there find the answers they're looking for. Without further ado, let me introduce today's encounter. First off, we start with Ben. Ben and Trent are both teenagers in high school. They both really love exploring the woods. Ben is the only one with property to do so, so Trent is over at Ben's. Now, Trent and Ben are very good friends. They like hanging out in the woods. They like exploring. They like doing about the same things. And so Ben suggested showing Trent this abandoned old car in the woods. Trent was more than excited. He was more than thrilled to basically go on this adventure in the woods. So they don their tactical equipment. They don their BB guns, thinking they're so cool. Teenagers in the mid-2000s. Again, they're in high school. They tromp out to the woods. Now, the woods don't technically start on Ben's property. It's actually about 3 or 4 property lines over. And in order to get there, you're just basically jumping fence after fence after fence. It's just barbed wire fencing held together by posts that are about chest high. Now, these are about 4 feet out of the ground. That's important for later in the story. Now, they make their way to the forest. The forest is initially met by a 4-wheel path that wraps around one property. So they go over the 4-wheel path. Instead of following it, they decide to go through the forest. And, it's only a couple hundred yards. They make their way through, and they come out to the other side of the 4-wheel path. Now, immediately on this 4-wheel path, they're going to have a decision to make. They can go left or they can go right. Now, they don't want to go down the middle because it's too thick. It's a major thicket, but also it's a ravine. It's about a teardrop-shaped ravine. And so in this thicket, you can no longer see the left side or the right side from the side you're on. It's too thick. So Ben looks at Trent and says, "Hey, man, we got to go right. The car we want to look at is down this way." And immediately as he finishes that sentence, immediately, they both hear, now not just a little bit of cawing, not just a little bit. They can't find any crows in the immediate trees around them. They look up, and boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, it's not 1 or 2 or a couple of dozen crows. It was thousands, they said, just circling overhead. And as soon as they begin to notice that, they also begin to notice on the other side of this teardrop-shaped ravine is that there's this loud noise, and they can't quite figure it out. In Ben's mind, he's kind of thinking, man, this sounds like an injured animal. Maybe it's a property owner. I can't be sure. Trent, not really too fazed by the noise. He's just like, yeah, it's probably an animal, but it's a really big one, making that much noise. And Ben's like, man, it sounds injured. It's making a lot of noise. And why are these birds circling overhead? Is it dying? Like, is that why they're circling overhead? I don't know. We should check it out. Well, they finish checking out the car. They make their way to the tip of the teardrop-shaped ravine, kind of do their own thing for about 15-20 minutes, and make their way back around. On the way back around, they're kind of doing this all tactically. They're like, hey, man, we got to be all tactical about this. What if there's a person up there? What if there's somebody hunting up there for crying out loud? We got to be careful. So they're going tree to tree to tree, and they get to about a hunting stand in the trees. And they're like, okay, this is almost to the 4-wheel path now. Why haven't we come across anything? They're looking on the ground. They're looking for marks. They said they had seen no blood, no tracks. It's covered with pine needles at this point, so you're not going to see anything anyway. At that point in time, they're still hearing what overhead. And at that same exact point, too, they hear what they came to inspect right where they were. So in that 15-minute time frame, not only did Ben and Trent make it to the other side of the ravine, so did that thing that was making all that noise on the ravine where they started their exploration. Being a little confused and a little thrown off by this, Ben and Trent decided to go back to Ben's property. They're jumping the fence lines. They finally make it back, and at which point they're almost back, I should say. They're through the four-wheel path, and they're in that initial section of forest, but not quite to Ben's property. They start hearing louder, like, I want to say branch snaps, but it's like something's walking through the woods, and it's breaking branches as it's walking by. I mean, if you've ever walked through the woods, you know you can't go through the woods without making some kind of noise. Anyways, they hear this coming after them. They bolt. By the time Ben and Trent are back on Ben's property, they're just kind of laughing it off, thinking, oh, well, hey, it was probably an animal or something caught our scent, bears or something like that. And so Ben takes one quick look back, and he said, this will always stay in my mind. I looked at the fence line at the beginning of those woods, and standing, holding its hand on one fence post down all the way. I mean, he could have easily been double that fence post. So at least 8 feet tall, he said. And it didn't click to him at first, the height or the color. He said there was no smell. He said the entire figure was standing upright like a human, and it was covered head to toe in black. But it was actually in the sun. And he said this part didn't really click until about 15 years later. He started getting into the paranormal and the supernatural. And so Ben calls Trent. However, Trent is no longer living in the Midwest, but he does go over this encounter with him. Ben explains to Trent that he believes he saw a Bigfoot. However, Trent comes back at him with, I totally agree. Completely caught off guard, Ben's feeling extremely confident, decides to go talk to his mom about this. This was basically on their land and what had happened. So Ben goes to his mother and starts explaining the story. Now, his mom, kind of with wide eyes, is a little shocked. She's surprised to hear this coming out of Ben's mouth so many years later after the fact. However, Ben does decide to proceed with his encounters to his mother, and his mother is watching and attentively listening with wide eyes, more of a puzzled look. But Ben finishes it, and he says, I waited for my mom's reaction. I was more worried what she was going to say or tell me than what I expected. The confusion turned more to worry, more to puzzling, and he said, finally, his mom spit out, no, I believe you. I believe you had seen something. Now, I want you to be more specific on when you think you saw it. Ben, thinking back, gives her a time frame, and with complete wide, shocked, mouth open expression, Ben's like, why? What happened? Well, Ben's about to be shocked because he did not know his mother had an encounter as well. Now, he believes it's with the same being because of how his mother explained this situation. The kids were back at school. Everybody was asleep. She had gotten up late one night to get a sip of coffee. Yes, Ben's mom drinks coffee in the middle of the night to fall back asleep. As weird as it sounds, it's true. Well, she gets her coffee, and she's drinking it, looking out the back window, staring at both of their garages. They got one in the far back that's pretty tan colored, that's illuminated pretty well by the moonlight and stars. And she says she's staring at it, and she's kind of worried because they had left the back door unlocked. So, hey, of that garage that she's staring at, hey, And that's when all of a sudden a figure walks by. Now, she said this figure was as tall as the top of the window because it was looking down in the window to look in. And it was about as wide as one window. She said this didn't even click for me until I saw you standing back there one day and realized you were shorter than the window. And that thing that I saw had to have been something of enormous size. Ben's mom, I mean, she's probably only 5.5 feet tall. Obviously, Ben's taller than her. She claims that this thing was looking down in the window. Ben goes back and investigates himself. He's like, yep, I'm as tall as the bottom of that window. So this thing was over 6 feet tall. This window is about 2 feet high. So this thing was now at least 8 feet tall. And if it's bending down to look in the window, it's 8+, depending on the exact memory she had, which, hey, we're kind of going off somebody's memory here. So let's be honest, we don't know exactly how tall it is. Could be 8 feet, could be 9 feet. We don't know. But she did say it was as wide as window. Now that is 4 feet. I'm only about 2 to maybe 2.5 feet wide. I'm not sure, but shoulder to shoulder. This thing had to be massive. She said it looked down in the window, went to the next one, looked down in the window, and just simply walked past the door and walked past the fence and through the yards. Ben was shocked. He did not expect this encounter to have taken place also. As confused as she was initially, he says, yeah, I completely believe you too. Well, they both agree that they think they saw a Bigfoot, and they both agree that it was roughly the same year, if not within a year. And so there you have it, folks. A family's decade plus long realization that they had the same encounter. I personally could not imagine how crazy it would be to find out my mother had the same exact experience as me. I would just be floored. Well, everyone, I can't thank Ben enough for coming forward with this encounter. If you guys have any encounters, please do not be scared to come forward. We're here to report on the strange, paranormal, and supernatural. Here on Limp-Cryptid, I'm your host, Axel. I hope we submerge some senses, ground some gears for every truth seeker alike. Peace.